Welcome to Crosstalk from the Deliverance Network. So happy to have you watching us, listening to us. We're filming in this beautiful February day in a forest near a park, so you're going to hear lots of children in the background playing out at recess. And I love to hear that noise personally as a mom of 6. It's just the joyful, innocent laughter of children, especially when sometimes we're coming and bringing you different content from the Deliverance Network. But today, I'm really excited to announce we have a special guest, Peter Allen, and he is going to be sharing a lot of information from his life history as a composer and talking to us about music and the liturgy particularly. And Peter is a Canadian-born composer. He has a prolific career in film scoring beginning in the 1990s. And he worked as a pianist with the Royal Winnipeg Ballet. And he was an active keyboardist with a number of local club and rock bands and was an established studio session player. And Alan moved to LA, actually, Los Angeles, in '86 to pursue studies in film scoring at USC and UCLA. And in 1988, he moved to Vancouver, BC, and he opened his own recording and sound production studio, Peter Allen Associates, Inc., so you can look that up online. He has composed music scores for more than 100 films, and he has worked with many of the American, Canadian, British film companies. You're going to recognize a lot of these names. It includes 20th Century Fox, Paramount Pictures, Sony Pictures, Warner Brothers, Disney, Universal, Cinetel Films, the National Film Board of Canada, the CBC, Lifetime, Hallmark, and lots of other independent film producers. He's also written music for a variety of television shows and series, including for the Winnipeg Jets in '79, the broadcast theme for the Toronto Blue Jays, the Montreal Expos, the Winning Spirit theme for the Vancouver Canucks, and also the international broadcast theme for the 1994 Commonwealth Games. And Peter was also involved in the music when Pope John Paul II came to Canada. I believe that was 1984, 85, don't quote me. So really happy to have Peter Allen with us today from the Deliverance Network on our Crosstalk series talking about music and the liturgy. Thanks, Peter, for joining us. I know you have so much to share that will be of interest to our viewers. Can you tell us a little bit about your background with music, music in the church, music in the liturgy, and how music influences the faithful?
I'm a committed Christian guy, and I'm a member of the Roman Catholic Church. But I've been, as a musician, played in well, not all, but a lot of the different denominations, and including the synagogues. So I'm been a full-time composer mostly for Hollywood for 30 years on movies and TV shows. But I've always been interested and been fascinated and drawn to music in liturgy, music as a form of worship, because it is a form of worship. And as a kid, I sang in mostly Anglican church choirs because they were just better choirs, sorry to say, but they were boys' choirs, and the music was very, very high quality. So music can build faith the same way that art can build faith. And what I mean by that is, if you've ever had the experience of walking into a large cathedral, in Europe, for example, I walked into Chartres and you're completely overwhelmed with the building and the stained glass and the architecture and the statues. It has an effect on you. It's a man-made effect. Men and women built those buildings, but it can have an effect on you and build faith. It's sort of shock and awe a little bit. And music can do the same thing. When you hear Bach's B minor Mass, for example, it isn't just a musical experience, it's a spiritual experience. For musicians, a lot of different kinds of music can be a spiritual experience. A Beethoven string quartet can also be a spiritual experience. And it usually is for the players, unless they're, not really plugged into the music. Music is always a spiritual experience. And even commercial music, pop music, rock music, jazz can be a spiritual experience. But for me, where it really makes sense is if the spiritual experience of music is connected to a spiritual experience in the form of a liturgy. So music in liturgy is not only important, obviously that's sort of an understatement, but the music in the liturgy should not only enhance the liturgy, but it should enhance the experience of the liturgy. And the music in the liturgy should be pointed towards whatever is the thread or the message of the liturgy that day. No matter whether the music is classical, contemporary, commercial, pop, rock, whatever style it is. It can be cultural music. It can be music from South America, Africa. There's all different kinds. So the music must be connected to the liturgy, and it must make sense with the liturgy. And if it isn't, if the music doesn't work, then you're gonna the liturgy will be disjointed, the same way that a bad sermon would pull you out of the liturgy. Or if you're sitting in a church and there's a construction site next door and they're banging and clanging or children screaming, it disconnects you from the liturgy. So the music must be connected and must enhance the liturgy and bring you into a closer relationship with what the liturgy is. And of course, liturgies have themes. One particular Sunday, the readings and the homily might be pointed towards discipleship. It might be pointed towards mercy. It might be pointed towards salvation. It might be pointed towards apostleship, or it might be pointed towards sin, or whatever topic. So the reason that I got into movies was kind of for the same reason. Music in a movie must enhance the story, make sense with the characters and the action, and work with the pacing of the scene. Same thing happens in a church service.
You've mentioned the various roles of music in the liturgy in our discussion. Can you expound on that a little bit for us?
I'm going to start with a ridiculous statement. And, I've worked in churches. We have a fairly good parish choir at St. Augustine's. Catholic church choirs tend to be struggling a little more than, let's say, some of the non-Catholic Christian communities, because it's just basically a financial thing. Protestant churches and evangelical churches spend a lot more money on their music ministries than Catholic churches do. Unfortunately, it's just a fact. What happens is music can play various roles the same way prayers do. Some music is designed for congregational participation. I've had musical experts in the Catholic Church say music should always be congregational. Actually, no, it should not. That's completely idiotic. The same way that some prayers in the church during the liturgy are not congregational. Some are designed for the priest to say only. The priest is the only person speaking. Obvious example would be the homily. But some music is designed for the priest to sing, for example, intonations. Some music is designed for only the congregation to be singing. For example, the response in a responsorial psalm. There's a cantor, that's designed for the cantor to sing, and then the congregation. So obviously, congregational hymns are congregational. The priest can sing or not, but it's congregational singing. But not all music in a liturgy is congregational. There are also anthems, and anthems can also enhance the liturgy the same way any other art form can enhance the liturgy. So after communion, you might hear Ave Verum Corpus or Laudate Dominum, and that's not designed for the congregation to sing. It's designed for the congregation to listen to, the same way they would listen to the homily. It delivers a specific message. So music plays many roles. There's also different genres of music that can be used to play those different roles. And that's where we get into historically, what kind of culture are you in? Are you in a European culture? Are you in an American culture? Are you in a Canadian culture? Are you in a Mexican culture? Are you in the Philippines? Are you in Central Africa? Are you in South Africa? Are you in Russia? Are you in Asia? That all plays a part in what the music is going to sound like. And what happened was, these facts might be slightly inaccurate, but basically in 2019, in Rome, they decided to have a music conference by the sacred music authorities in Rome. And I believe that prior to 2019, The last one was in 1911 or something like that. It was a big gap, and way before Vatican II. And so they decided to revisit having international music conferences for music in the Roman Catholic Church. And what they decided to do at these conferences was to invite creators of music, not music makers. So what they didn't want was a bunch of organists or people who sing in church or guitar players or whatever. They wanted creators of music. And I applied and I was accepted to go. They had 50 people. And it was a fabulous conference because the quality of the talent of that thing was like, I was lower guy on the totem pole in this thing. They had guest speakers who were terrific, about 6 or 7 of them. They had some cardinals there and some priests and so on. But one of the things they emphasized was the fact that music can and perhaps should be a product of the culture you're in, which the church never officially said before. And they said it quite clearly, including the inclusion of dance in liturgy. Because if you remember, under Pope Benedict, dance in liturgy was kind of canceled under his watch. We did have it under Jean Paul II. In this first meeting, and I went to Rome for it, it was live, it was at Lumsey University, right outside the Vatican gates. But I was quite thrilled and happy to hear that they brought this up about music being the style. So the message was, you can use, and this is important, the instrumentation of the culture you're in for a Roman Catholic Mass liturgy, the styles of the music you're in, and the forms. That's a big deal, because prior to that experience in Rome, no one had ever said that. So of course, traditional musical styles are welcome and of course desired in the Catholic Church, which means chant and the organ and traditional hymnody. But what they're saying is, post-Vatican II, we welcome the use of song forms in church. And not only, so I put my hand up, I was one of the, I'm a sort of a busybody, said, okay, so my question to the officials here today is, if I'm in the Ozarks, can I have a Roman Catholic choir in a Roman Catholic Mass that's accompanied by a gut bucket bass and a Jew's harp? And they said, yeah, you can. Oh, okay. That's interesting, because that probably wouldn't have been accepted prior to. In other words, yes, you can use the song forms. You can use commercial song forms in church. So, you know, those of us that had commercial music in church before, commercial forms, for example, in the 70s, we had what I call a rock mass in Winnipeg, which drew an enormous crowd. It was really very successful. There were a lot of clergy that actually came out of that congregation later, but it was challenged by, you know, some of the people in the church in Winnipeg at that time, but they let it go. My point is that now the church is saying, okay, you know, if you want to use guitars, bass, drums, and basically secular instruments in church, it doesn't have to be the pipe organ or only a piano. Whereas if you would have said, well, I want to bring a band into church, and if you would have done that in 1971, you probably would have had a lot of opposition to it. Now Rome, and of course Rome was silent on it in 1971, they didn't say anything. Now they're kind of saying that. So the second conference like this was in 2020. I think this was 2018. I think it was the one I went to. It's 2019. I can't remember what happened. I think or maybe 2020 was the one yes, that was the one they canceled. But the second one that I went to was on Zoom, just like this. And the opening speech was given by Pope Francis. It was great. And they kind of did the same thing. Again, they talked a lot about dance in the liturgy. And of course, everyone took notes. And they talked about the inclusion of dance in the liturgical form. And again, the use of various styles, and then they had examples of that. So the mindset of music and the way that music is applied and the styles of music is applied to liturgy is, I think, changing. And I think it's long overdue. You might get some purists and traditionalists that are going to say, I don't think so, Peter. And they're going to argue with it. And I beg to differ. So I guess what I'm trying to say in summary is that it's not my opinion that we should be using modern instruments and modern forms in liturgy. Rome is also saying that now as well.
Well, you've mentioned sacred dance with regard to these conferences, and I'm very curious about dance in the liturgy. Can you discuss this and tell us a little bit more about it and its significance?
What do I mean by dance? Well, if you've ever been to the LA music conferences, they always have sacred dancers. And my first, in other words, they have dancers. They actually dance to music in the liturgy. They're dancing. And of course, in Africa, it's very, very common. And as a matter of fact, on this last convention, they had a lady from Africa who was a theologian. I can't remember her name now, and I've even got photographs of her, but she made kind of an interesting statement. She said, dance is so much a part of music in Africa at Roman Catholic masses that her biggest problem was trying to record the choir because they were dancing around while they were trying to record them. So they put up microphones, like, they put up their stereo pair, and they're hopping all over the place. So it's kind of hard to get a recording. And so she kind of gave up on that, I think, and she just provided a video. And yeah, and pictures. But my first experience of sacred dance in liturgy was about 1973. And this was in Winnipeg at this, what I call a Sunday night rock mass. It was a Jesuit church called St. Ignatius. We started playing there in 1969, 1970, and in 2 years, there were 900 kids in there. You couldn't get in the building. The oldest person at the mass was 35 years old, including the priest. It was unbelievably vibrant. We didn't have liturgists. We didn't have anybody telling us what to do. It just all happened like magic. And that I attribute to the action of the Holy Spirit. Because how else could something come together and nobody knowing this was going to happen, and every piece just fit together like a perfect recipe. And it really, really worked. And so anyway, the point of this is it was Sunday evening. One Sunday I pull up, I'm getting ready, walking in. I played bass in that group. And there was a bus parked outside the church, said Sacred Dance Group from Boulder, Colorado. And I go, what the heck is the Sacred Dance Group from Boulder, Colorado doing here? And I had worked as a pianist for the Royal Winnipeg Ballet, which was a terrific dance company. People don't realize the Royal Winnipeg was an international level ballet at that time in the 70s. So I go in, and here's these 6 women, all maybe in their middle to later 30s. And they were going to put on a ballet called Stained Glass Windows. And they did it after communion. And they had their tape recorder, and they did sacred dance to these songs from Jesus Christ Superstar and Godspell, this kind of stuff, because don't forget that was popular at that time. There were 6 women, and they had they had beautiful gowns on, and they were all one color. One would be orange, one was purple, red, blue, green, single colors. And they said, well, we're going to play these tapes, when we play these back through a machine, because we put up a PA, well, what are the songs? So they told us the songs, and well, we know all those songs. We sing all those songs. They were quite surprised. You do? Well, yeah, we can sing I Don't Know How to Love Him. We know Hosanna, 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 Ho, Day by Day. We do all those songs. Well, do you do them like the recordings from you say, yeah, we do the same with them. So they said, oh, so they said, can we have a rehearsal? So they were quite impressed by the band we had, because it was a pretty good sounding band. It was all professional players. These 6 women were outstanding dancers, and I found out that they were all from the New York Ballet. Oh. So they weren't just amateurs. These girls were pros. And because they were 37, 38 years old, guess what? They're too old for the lifespan of a ballet dancer. I don't know if you know this is pretty short. It's shorter than a hockey player. By the time you're in your 30s, it's like, 35, you're out of the ballet. So they still wanted to dance. They were all committed Christians. They were fabulous. They wrote this choreography themselves. They did it, and it was breathtaking. That was my first experience of that. It enhanced the liturgy. I think everyone that was there that night was blown away by this thing. And then I never saw it happen again for years. And when I came to St. Augustine's in the 90s, at that time for our Easter Vigil, I spoke to the priest at that time. I said, during the vigil, why don't we bring in some dancers? And he was for it. And so I knew the director of one of the ballet companies here in Vancouver. So we brought in, I think it was the same thing. I think it was about 5 or 6 dancers, and they did some dance at offertory. They brought up the gifts and all this stuff, and everybody liked it. And then what happened was Benedict became the Pope and said, no more dance. So we actually canceled it. We had to stop doing it. But now it's becoming more prevalent, and you'll see that there's, I'm not huge on it, but I was very supportive of the idea. And if you go and look online now, you'll probably find music and dance and liturgy, and you'll probably find something written about it,
Peter, you've spoken to us quite a bit about music and dance and liturgy, and I feel this is intuitive and that they're connected to worship, as I feel both dance and music can be very spiritual. And I've heard it said as well that those who sing to God pray twice. And even with secular music, I find that one can feel particularly connected to God through song. Can you tell us a little bit about your feelings about music and song as a prayer form?
Yes, I think pretty much anything can be a prayer form, really. But dancers think the same thing. And when I was working in the RWB, there was 2 dancers, Sheila McKinnon and David Maroney were the principals at that time. And I can't remember which one. And I was playing the piano in their rehearsals and stuff. One of them came in and we were talking about this. And they said, if you're alive, you're moving. A corpse is lying still. As soon as a corpse is breathing and able to think and feel, it moves. So when you're an artist, you're basically controlling the parameters of that art, aren't you? So a musician or composer, in my case, is controlling the parameters of music. In other words, tempo, sonority, pitch, rhythm, those parameters. I'm trying to think of the 5th one, but well, an artist is controlling the parameters of visual art, color, shape, form, stuff like that. A sculptor is doing the same thing. What's a dancer doing? They're controlling their movements, or a choreographer. They're controlling the parameters of movement. So to them, art is prayer. Unless you're doing something diabolical. I mean, you can have evil prayers too. You can pray to the devil, or you can have, dance that is overtly sexual. You can say, well, that's not overly prayerful. It's kind of, maybe pulling us away from the sacred a little bit. But our dance is just as prayerful of an art form as music is, or the spoken word. When a priest writes a homily, what's he doing? He's controlling the parameters of what he's writing. A writer is an artist, and they're controlling what they're doing, what they're saying. And it can be either premeditated or it can be improvisational. In other words, a person can create a written word, or a choreographer can create a choreography, or a composer can create a score, and it's all followed. That's wonderful. Or it can be an improvisation. So a priest might just, or anyone, Martin Luther King can just launch into whatever he's trying to say at the time, or a musician can improvise. Church is very improvisational. Bach improvised, a lot of his music, including the musical offering, and the same thing for visual artists. They have improvisational art now. You can throw a bunch of paint on a canvas and see what happens, or you can have theater is often preset or improvised. So it just depends on how you want to control the parameters of the art you're in. But it doesn't matter which art form you're in or how you're controlling the parameters. It's always prayerful if you want it to be.
Well, we've spoken previously about the effervescent creative nature of the Holy Spirit, and that he initiates and enervates our creative abilities, which you have illustrated. And he gives life to our creativity, our prayer, and our worship. and you've spoken a great deal about this creativity as it pertains to music. As everyone knows, the past 1.5 years, 2 years have been very difficult with COVID. We've seen many changes in our experience of the Mass, including greatly reduced music and the ability to even sing at Mass. Do you have any thoughts about how this has flavored our experience of Mass?
Well, I think so. I mean, I've been busy every Sunday and probably busier than normal because I've had to write scripts when we first started the Zoom masses, it was just the priest in the church, and I was in the studio with a cello player singing and playing on a piano. It's definitely changed the community, the community aspect of it, because Mass is a social thing, as well as a spiritual thing. So, I mean, the question is, our choirs have all stayed at home. Are we going to be able to get them back? It's going to be harder, I think. I don't really have any profound thoughts other than that it's just put a big pause button on a lot of things.
Well, I'm encouraged to hear some of the developments that you've discussed with us regarding to music conferences in Rome and your story of the Spirit being so alive at that popular rock mass that you spoke of. I personally believe this draws in the creative energy of the Holy Spirit in a deeper way. Do you have any thoughts regarding these developments that we're seeing?
Just on that topic, I mean, because I've been sort of a mercenary musician, I am Catholic, brought up Catholic, and I'm still a member of the Catholic Church. But as a musician, I've played in a lot of non-Catholic churches, plus the synagogue. We forget that Catholics really didn't encourage congregational singing at all until after Vatican II. In other words, the Reformation started with, I mean, you probably a lot better historians than I am, but the Reformation started with the Brotherly Union in Zurich with a guy named Statler. And, they used to, the reformers gathered in a barn and they sang hymns. What was their focus? Was to meet in secret because they were rebelling against the RC church at that time. And their focus was, well, what do we do? Well, we can pray and we can sing hymns. And when you look at the Old Testament, they sang psalms and hymns of praise to God. The Catholic Church prior to Vatican II was more of a listening role. They even had rood screens in churches in Europe because of disease, but choirs sang and chant. The congregation wasn't a sing-along event. And after Vatican II, they sort of wanted to change that and make hymns more congregational. A lot of Catholics are shocked to find out that in our Catholic Book of Worship, most of the hymns in our Catholic Book of Worships are Protestant hymns. And they go, what? Well, yes, they were Protestant. Catholics didn't sing hymns. They sang chant. So, a lot of the hymns that are in there are Reformationist hymns, or they're evangelical hymns, or they're Methodist hymns, or stuff like that. So we haven't really been at it for very long, and we really put up a lot of barriers. And what I mean by that is, when we did our rock mass thing in Winnipeg, we had a band that was right in front of the ambo, clearly visible. We put the words up on a great big screen, and everyone was looking forward, and we had everyone singing. The problem, I think, with the RC church is they had, when the choir sitting in choir loft at the back of the building, no one could see them, and yes, you could hear them, and their argument was, well, choir shouldn't be visible. Oh, really? Is the priest visible when he's giving his homily? He's not hiding around the corner in the transept somewhere. So I really strongly resist this attitude of some very traditional, conventional people that believe that the choir should be hidden behind a screen somewhere and only heard and not seen. Utter nonsense. If you want the congregation to contribute and participate in the liturgy, you've got to lead them. So whenever I went and played for, the non-Catholic churches, the Presbyterian Church, the United Church, the Methodist Church, the United Church, the Anglican Church even had one up on us. The choirs were in the front. And in the Roman Catholic Church, by the way, there used to be two until they put choir lofts in the back. And in the synagogue too. The choirs were very, very visible and really encouraging of congregational singing. You're more likely to want to sing along if someone in front of you is singing, not if it's out of sight, out of mind. And I think the Roman Catholic churches not really going to get a great congregational response, generally speaking, until they adopt a different attitude towards it. And there's a lot of people floating about now who are very competent Catholic theologians and musicians and clergy who would all completely disagree with me. And my point is, what did Jesus say? By their fruits you shall know them. You hide the choir around a corner, the fruits are going to be a real lack of congregational participation.
Well, thank you so much to Peter Allen for joining us at the Deliverance Network and our Crosstalk series. And hopefully really enjoyed everything that he had to share with us regarding music and the liturgy. Obviously a very talented individual with such an amazing background in music composition and as a talented musician. And so please check out more information, should you wish, about Peter Allen and his background and the work he's currently doing. You can look him up on his IMDb page and find his biography there. And you can also check out his website at peterallenassociates.com. So thank you so much to Peter Allen for all of his time here at the Deliverance Network. I'm hopeful that you really enjoyed this segment on music in the liturgy. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, like us, visit our ministries at thedeliverancenetwork.com and sisterhood.live. We look forward to bringing you further content and lots of amazing interviews coming up. So stay tuned, the Deliverance Network Crosstalk, and may God bless you in your journey today.